Hello, hello everyone. Good morning, good evening. My name is Pranav Bhagat, and I welcome you to Create a Toolbox, a show brought to you by ServiceNow, where we demo ServiceNow new features for your toolkit. Hold on a second. I hope there is no echo. So I was just saying that welcome to Create a Toolbox, a show brought to you by ServiceNow Developer Program, where we demo new features for our developers. And as you can see on the right side of your screen, I think Daniel, you can point it out to the Vancouver logo. We are currently in the middle of the Vancouver release, and go ahead and check out our content calendar at devling.sn/Vancouver. So before we jump into the content, let's do some introduction. My name is Pranav Bhagat, and I'm a senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. And I have close to 8 years of experience in ServiceNow. Before joining ServiceNow, I was working with a customer and was helping them with an implementation. I'm going to pass it to Daniel. Daniel, you're on mute, I think.
One. Yeah, that should better. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
Perfect.
So, hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for having me back on the show here on Creator Toolbox. My name is Daniel. I am a Principal Product Success Manager at ServiceNow for Creator Workflow topics with a strong focus on automation engine. Been with the ServiceNow ecosystem for, I think, like 12 years by now, something like that. Similar like you, Pranav. I started on the customer side before moving over to the mothership 10 years ago. I'm glad to be here today to talk about Vancouver.
Awesome. That's perfect, Daniel. So I'll just pass it to you. So to show us what's new coming in RPA in Vancouver. I'm so excited about it. So let's get into the new features.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so for RPA Hub, that's our focus point for today. All the RPAs, the robot topics around. You know, this is still a fairly new capability in the platform, been around for 1.5 years, something like that, roughly, which means it's kind of our third release of features. And as you will see, we constantly add new stuff to that. This is one of the growing things of the platform where we're adding more and more things into it. So as this is Create a Toolbox, we won't bore you with a lot of slides. I still have a few slides, and Safe Harbor, you know that part. We should be talking only about Vancouver today, but let's see what the questions are. Maybe you divert us from that, and I might refer to the Safe Harbor if we talk about something going forward. But what you'll see today, what I will be presenting, what I actually go to demo at least in some of these points, is all Vancouver features. So with Vancouver upgrades on your environment, you can get these features. Some of them are Vancouver Store 1, which is basically more or less now. And some of them are Vancouver Store 2 coming out, I think, in November, December timeframe. So they might be a little later if you don't see them in your environment as of today, let's say. So we'll go through, obviously, the RPA Desktop Design Studio, our authoring experience for creating these automations running robots. And we also have a few things on RPA Hub, that's the ServiceNow backend, basically, operating and maintaining all your robots. Is that not boring you with a lot of slides? So I have for each of these topics, just one slide introducing it. So you can also maybe refer to the slide deck later on, and then we go right into the system and see that. New with Vancouver release is the way how we integrate Flow Designer with RPA Desktop Design Studio. You know, hopefully, or you probably know that in the past already, you could invoke subflows from RPA Desktop Design Studio by a simple component. However, finding the flow or mapping the input fields was a bit more tedious, and we have gladly improved that. We have also added invoke flow. I think that is a part that was not there before, so we can now call any entity activity in Flow Designer from flows, subflows, and actions. And while we talk about it, let's go in and do that right now. So I already have Desktop Design Studio opened. Let's open a new unattended automation, which we'll be using for the demo today. Let's call that Creator Tool. If I can spell that, Toolbox, and it is the 29th of August, 2023. The empty project, which we'll be using throughout the show today to show you and highlight some of the new features and capabilities. Let's just take a couple seconds to create that project. Here we go.
And and I think
Yes.
Daniel, like I'll probably add on. This is something like really like this was our developers asked a lot about how we can invoke the flows, subflows, and action. And I don't know whether you will cover the search functionality that we
Yes.
just also launched in Vancouver. So that's exciting. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's exactly what I want to do in the next probably 3-4 minutes, something like that. Because I
yeah.
am very excited about that. I think this is something that was missing absolutely in the past. Right. So
Yeah, before I think like we had to copy paste the ID flow ID directly. That's like that was prone to mistakes. So now it's easier. So we can
absolutely.
search everything.
Absolutely. So let's do that right away, right? So we go to RPA Hub into our toolbox, open up Flow Designer. We find all the components in there, very familiar like before. And apologize for the screen resolution here. I hope you can read that. So let's drag invoke subflow onto our canvas. Here we go. And if you remember in the past, there was an input where you would type in the flow name and you would need to remember the scope, dot, flow name, and all these things, which makes it a bit tedious,
So
right?
Daniel, like one thing, like can you zoom it a bit, like so that we on the component. So on below, I think we have a zoom
Yeah,
in on the canvas thing, so we can utilize that.
thank you. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just like, where the hell do I zoom? If you're working with big screens, you tend to forget the nifty parts. Is that better?
Yep. That looks great.
Awesome. So now, oops, wrong button. Go back to design. Here we go. So now this is I would call it an active component. It is talking to ServiceNow. So to be able to talk to ServiceNow, we need to log into to our instance. See on the bottom, we are currently not connected. The gray dot here is gray. So let's connect to our instance, which we have a Vancouver demo instance handy. And you know that part. First time you launch Studio and you connect it to an instance, you obviously have to type in your credentials. See, no, see, when you do it live, can't type passwords. Here we go. Yes, allow going in here. Close the browser. Now we are connected. We see the green dot. And what I can do now, and that's the search functionality that you mentioned, Pranav, I can take this component, click that little gear icon to configure it, and we get this new dialog to search for subflow. All it needs is basically 3 letters to start off searching. And I created a subflow called update incident. Right? You type in up something, and it searches all the subflows in that case, as we're wanting to execute a subflow with UPD. And it's not necessarily at the beginning, it's somewhere in the name. So you can find each one that you want to have. In my case, wanted to demo update incident. It's now interrogating that subflow, figuring out, oh, we get 2 input fields, an incident number and a work node. Let's open that one. And it automatically creates these input ports for us to actually call that flow. How convenient is that? We don't need to start mapping, typing stuff. It's all just there for us, right? So for the sake of a quick demo, just enter some values that I know exist, and we'll have a look at that. An incident number on that instance we are connected. Let's say hello from creator toolbox. That's my subflow, and I can just go like this and execute it now. It takes, you see, less than a second. And if I go to my instance, which I have handy here, not gonna need that, I would go to incidents. Incidents, open. We used an incident called 9005, which should be this one. And you can see here in the work notes, we have our comment, hello from creator toolbox. There we go. That's very easy to call and invoke a flow or subflow or an action that is in Flow Designer.
I think that's perfect, Daniel. I think like I have one question for you. Like I see that it posted with your name, like
Mhm.
Daniel Draes. So is it something like from the user that we use to connect our desktop design studio? So it will post from that particular user. So is it a functionality? Can we post it using a system user or something like that? If we don't want to post it from a specific user?
So correct. You've seen me logging in Desktop Design Studio. That's why Studio is using this connection as my user. And that's why you see my name pumping up here as the one who did the update. As soon as you put that robot into a, let's say, live environment, that robot would be executed by an unattended robot engine, and it would use the credentials that user is using when logging into the instance, right? So typically, yes, that is a technical user. I generally use a user called like rpa.robot or something like that. And yes, that user needs to have privileges to update that incident in that case, right? My user has admin, so it can do anything. But if you want to update, let's say, a purchase requisition on a work order item, a HR case, whatever it is, you need to make sure that this user you're using has privileges to update that, because we trigger that flow in the context of that user, correct?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Daniel, for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. So that's very easy to call a flow, execute a flow. And just to complete that, what was there before already is like get outputs as another component, right? We can retrieve outputs from that flow. Let's just put that on the back of this. When we call that flow again, we do get outputs, and let's get the context ID in. Now the flow will take a couple seconds to run, right? For the sake of this simple demo, I just do a pause here of like 10 seconds, give ServiceNow time to update whatever it has to do in the flow and run that get outputs. Let's just run that one more time. Same content. It's now 10 seconds wait here before it executes get outputs. What I want to show here, though, is as soon as that finishes, that we also get return information from ServiceNow. If I now go on to my return thing and say preview the data that we received, in that case, we get back an incident status. That's just what I put into my flow. You can return any kind of information from ServiceNow that you need. So you can use this technology to look up records, update records, whatever you need, trigger integrations via REST or whatever, right? And can use that pattern to do that. While you do that, just keep in mind flows will be executed asynchronously. So you need to either, like I did, put in a pause in here for a couple of seconds, or you need to kind of use get execution status and loop around and wait for the flow to actually execute.
Yeah, I think this is one of the highlights of Vancouver release. Like you can invoke all these flows and all. So according to me, I really love this feature. Yeah.
It opens so much possibilities that you can do with your RPA, right?
Yes. And this is just the first feature that we talked about. So
that's the first, and
yeah,
I think the first and most important one for me as well. Absolutely.
Yes.
Another great feature, and one that has been asked for, is what we call code quality checks. When you build your robots, we can now add what we call quality checks. Basically, if you're familiar with the ServiceNow side, where we have instance scan to scan for bad practices within the instance, we have now a similar thing on the robot side, where we can check your robot before you actually deploy it if you did obey to your own rules, right? And let me show you a quick demo of that as well. If I go back to my studio, let's maybe just finalize this robot as bad as it is. It's just doing two things: connect the start and end, so we have it at least built properly. We have now a code quality check, right? And you can basically run that on this activity. You can run it on the whole project. You can view the rules that are there, and I'll get to that in a moment. So let's just run that. This one, it's checking, and you get a new tab or pane open, which says, well, there's nothing wrong with that. This flow is good, or this automation is good. Let's make it bad, right? Just drop another item somewhere, which is just free floating, not connected anywhere. If I now run my code quality check, it actually tells me, hey, you got a warning here. Let me make that maybe bigger if I put that down here. I like it better. So we can see there's a warning, unused component. You got an unused component, and you can actually select that. I think I double click, and it tells you, hey, this component that you have in your automation is not used. Why are you having it there? And this is defined as a warning. I can still continue. We have others that are actually treated as errors. And you can see all these rules either going in here. You can see all the list of rules that are currently active. You can see, like, it's checking for infinite loops. Do we have a main activity or a startup activity and stuff? So these are 5 things that are active in our environment. But if you actually go into ServiceNow in your environment and look for robotic process automation, code quality rules. That is where these rules are. And we delivered 12 of them out of the box currently. And you can decide yourself if they should be active or not, and what kind of severity. Is it only a warning, or is it a hard error? And hard error means you cannot publish this automation until you fix that problem. So you can prevent something going into your productive environment with that, right? And there are a whole bunch of different things. Some of them that you actually can configure, like where do we have that variable naming convention? If you look at that, you go in here, we have a regular expression which says all variables must follow this pattern. So you can define your own pattern, how you want your RPA developers to name variables, as an example. So we have this list of these 12 items. At this moment in time, you cannot create your own ones. You're kind of limited to these 12 that we have, but we will extend them. And maybe later on in one of the future releases, we open that up. I can't promise that. But for now, these are the 12s you have. And one more thing that I wanted to show, if I am in Studio, and if I want to publish this automation, which has an issue, as we know, I can click publish, which would package the whole thing and move it over to ServiceNow. At that moment in time, we will run the code quality checks and we'll let you know automation contains one or more errors. Make sure what you do is correct. And these are warnings, so I am allowed to continue. If it's a hard error, the publish button wouldn't be there. I can't publish it anymore. So these are really nice features. We also store the information. If I take that and publish it, we get that package. It's now published. If I now go back to RPA Hub, which we have here, and look at this new published package, we can see the status of the code quality check in ServiceNow. So we can also react on that and maybe raise a case, a development task, a defect, or whatever we use for our developers once it has loaded. There we go. Let's go into the package. Packages. We have create a toolbox. That's the package we just created today. Obviously, that package has one version. Right? If the status is linked to the version, and you can see we have here a column called code quality result warning. So there was at least one warning in that package. You can build your deployment flows, your process flows, whatever you need, you can build on that information going forward. I like this tool, this feature or toolset a lot because I think it makes the quality of the robots that we build more robust. Right? And I'm sure we will add more and more quality checks. If you have ideas for quality checks, please put them in the chat, right? We can still bring that back to our team, say that might be a good idea to be added as a check. By the way, Chad, I see Surab has a question here.
Yeah, I can go through that question. So Saurabh was asking, does Design Studio have any prerequisite for browser or hardware? Like when we install it on our Windows machine, does it have any prerequisites? Like, are you asking about the RAM? Like, how much is the RAM required and all these things, Saurabh? If you are in the chat, you can probably paste it. But I think that's what he's asking, Daniel. So you can probably let us know, like, what are some of the prerequisites if you want to install it on our Windows. Firstly, definitely it should be a Windows machine. And what are the other things, Daniel?
Yeah, as I said, we definitely need a Windows machine. Ideally, that's a Windows desktop because that's the authoring environment for a developer. You would install that not on a server, on a virtual server, somewhere in a data center. It's basically the machine of the developer that you develop your automations on. Mm-hmm. In terms of browser, we'll get to a browser in a moment. We support browsers of Edge and Chrome these days. I think we are not supporting Firefox at the moment. For RPA automations, and certainly not Internet Explorer. Don't use that anymore. It's really old, outdated. But Edge and Chrome, so basically all Chromium-based browsers should work just fine.
Gotcha. Yep. I think we can move into the next feature, Daniel.
Sure. Let me bring the slides back. So this is a great feature, code quality checks. And I get some updates here. Awesome. Stop bugging me. PDF connector. Oh no. Let me see. I hope it doesn't reboot. PDF connector. So in the past, we had a whole bunch of components in our toolbox to work with PDFs, like convert to image, get tables, get page count. So these were all separated components in the toolbox. So if I go into RPA, you would find them here into our toolbox, right? And I think they are all gone now. If you search for PDF, all you find is a PDF connector. And it works like any other Office connector with Word or Excel or Outlook for the sake, right? Or Chrome. You take this connector, you drag it over to a global object, which instantiates it. And then you have that connector, you can double click it, give it a name, and you get all these features on the connector. So why did we do that? For once, we have a better collection of what is all around PDFs. And the other thing is it's also performance and memory, right? With the PDF connector, you would actually say, I'm loading a PDF file. And then once it's loaded, I can do all this stuff, convert images, convert to XML, get tables. So we load the file only once. With the components before, every component you would use would load the file, do the stuff, close it. Now with this one, we only load it once, and it's available for all the other options. So this is really powerful, great. And we also added the feature of working with password-protected PDF files. And I got a little password-protected file here to demo that. If we look here, let me see, in my downloads, I have here a sample protected file. If you see, if you open that one up with Adobe Acrobat, it should ask us for a password. Just to prove the point here. Yeah, okay. Didn't do that a long time, I guess. See, it's asking for a password, right? And if you don't have the password, you can't get into that PDF file. You might get these types of files. So let's use that one and see how we can get into that file now from our design studio. I'll take just the file name here. I copy that from this one because it gives me the full path and everything I need. Put that in here as my file path and put in a password. Now the password is highly secure. Okay, test in my case. Once we have loaded that, let's say we want to get text. I know this PDF has some text in it. So just run these two, run from here. Takes a moment to load the PDF, extracting the text information. And if I now preview the data coming out of that, we can see like a simple PDF. That is part of the PDF file that I have in there. If we don't have the password, I don't get that text. So we support that now, which is a great addition.
So Daniel, like that's a great feature. Only thing that I would like to ask is like, are these password encrypted? Because I'm seeing the password right now that you set in the automation. So I see it's a string field as of now. So is there any way to encrypt these password? And like, what's the encryption?
Absolutely. Usually you would store that password in ServiceNow, fetch it from a ServiceNow property and just use it in here. For the sake of simple demo, I just typed it in directly. But we do have, if we go to the toolbox, come on, toolbox, if you search for, I think it's called decrypt string. So there's strings that we can decrypt and something also with secure strings, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, secure string, encode, decode. So we have ways to work with encrypted strings to use them as a password. In this moment, when they get into that connector, it has to be decrypted because it just, yeah, it needs the clear text password, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks, Daniel.
Awesome. Coming back to our PDF connector, so it can do a whole bunch of things like converting it to images, to Word and stuff, all the things you had before. And I think we also added like more convenient function like merging and splitting files, right? So if you have a large PDF files, you want to load it, split it down into by pages, or you get a bunch of PDF files, you want to merge them together into one before you process them further. So I think these ones are new. They were not there before, or at least have been changed in the way how they work. The rest should be stuff you might be familiar from our previous PDF components, just now combined under the umbrella of that PDF connector. All right, let's move on in the same thing. Oops, that was two things. Password protected Office files, similar like with PDF I just showed. We now have, when you have Word or Excel files, when you open them, also a password feature, so we can use password protected Office files. I don't have a demo prepared for that, but I think you have seen the PDF one. It works the same way. At opening the file, we supply the password, and then we can read these files. If you don't have the password, we can't open them. Right? We can also create, I believe, password-protected files, right? Like in Excel, if you give a file path that doesn't exist with a password, we generate a password-protected file, and you can put stuff in there.
And I think, Daniel, like this is something like I think we can ask the product team if we can encrypt the password directly in the component itself,
Mhm.
because some developers or client might be using a hard-coded password directly here.
Yeah.
So either we have to ask them like, oh, don't put it there, or put it as a code quality checker like
There
component
you
there.
go.
So
Yeah.
that don't use it because it will throw an error before they publish it. So this
Yeah.
is might be a good enhancement for
Absolutely.
it.
I like your
Yeah.
thinking. Put that into a code quality checker. Don't use plain text password. Make sure you have them encrypted.
Yep.
And also provide the option to pass in encrypted ones so the component can decrypt them on the fly. I like that.
Yeah, maybe, and also like if they're passing even the string one, it should be hidden or something
Mhm.
rather than showing
Yeah, what you
directly on the
can
order sheet.
do, let me think, is that on these ones?
Yep.
Uh, uh, port properties, you can mark it as sensitive data and you don't see them
Ah,
anymore. It's still a clear text field, but at least it's hidden when you open it, right? It's still not as far as you want to have it, but at least you can mark it sensitive and you don't show them.
yeah, for especially for this password thing, it should be
Default.
default to
Mhm.
sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is something.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. We know passwords are sensitive, so we should have that as a default. I'll definitely take that
Yep.
feedback to the team.
Yes.
All right. Moving forward, some changes to the way we work with web pages, with Chrome and Edge. One thing I wanted to show is a JS or JavaScript locator. Let's go back into Studio. Let me see. We have a Google page open. Awesome. So the way we work with browsers, as you know, is our universal app connector, right? This one connects to any kind of application, same like the PDF. I just drop it over to global objects. It instantiates itself and I can start configuring it. And I refresh, find all screens that are out there, and we find Google. I want to have Google here. Add that screen, and now I can work with that Google screen, right? That's we find the way we find it by title, URL, and stuff. That's all great. Let's capture an element. In this case, just the search box for the sake of doing that. Come on. Search. That. There we go. Now we have an element, which is our text area for search. And you see we have different types of locators here. In this case, our universal connector thought, oh, that field has an ID. Let's use the ID. Quite oftenly, I have seen that with other web pages that it actually falls back to a CSS selector, which would go like this. Or in some of the blog posts, I told you how to use tag name and use the attribute. So we have different ways how we identify an element on a web page, right? And what we have added now is, and let me just copy and paste the string here, a JavaScript locator. So if none of the actually locators that we have works for you because your web page is maybe so strange, so old style or whatever, you can use that JavaScript locator and put in any arbitrary JavaScript that you want to and just return the object. In this case, a very simple one is document get elements by ID, which is actually the same like using the ID. Doesn't make a lot of difference from a purpose, but I wanted to showcase how it works. So we return the element by that ID. And if I now refresh, it still works. It still finds the object. And I can do the same thing like I would do with other objects. So navigate down, text search, and maybe say set text. Set text on this one. And that's hello from RPA. If I execute this component, it goes very fast. If I go to Chrome, we see hello from RPA is put in here. So we executed that arbitrary JavaScript, which is kind of hidden in our app connector here. Text search to find the object on page. It opens way more possibilities to find an object on a page or multiple objects, right? If you want to get a whole table, array, or something like that, you have way more flexibility now to work with that kind of things here, right?
So Daniel, like what I understand from this is like, for example, we use document.getElement by ID. So we can fetch any ID on the page, and we don't have to use the attributes or anything. We can just write the JavaScript and get the ID, right? And it's kind of like I think that's there. So
So
yeah.
for experienced JavaScript developers, this is, I think, a powerful thing because they have the full control of how to parse the page, basically. So far, they were dependent on the features we provided, but with this one, we open up the doors and they can do anything they want to.
Yes. And I think like as it's part of the selector thing, so it might be a bit confusing for the developers. Like when I looked into it for the first time right now, it's saying JS selector and the match attributes were also showing in the bottom. So that was kind of confusing. So
Mhm.
maybe we can just have it as a separate column or something so that it's easier for the developers to understand. Like,
Ah,
yeah, what if,
okay.
because if you open it back again, the component, and just open it and select the JavaScript, you can see in the bottom it shows match attributes also.
Mhm.
So that might be confusing. I'm not sure whether these both work together. Like, is it
They
like an
should be
or
actually working
statement?
together. They should be working together, I think, but I haven't tried it, to be honest. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, maybe we need to check
Yeah.
how the engineers develop this thing. Yeah, that's
Yes, usually locator plus attributes work together. That's fine. But I get your point. Yeah, it is maybe not obvious if and how they work together. Yes.
yeah, because is it an or statement or is it an and statement? Like
Mhm.
we are putting the query on top, like get this by this ID, and it should have this particular class, or is it of this type or something? So maybe it's like we need to check
Yeah, I would need to
with
craft a page basically with multiple objects to see if and how these work together. And the simplest example here with Google doesn't really help me. My assumption is they work as an and. So because we locate the object and we match the attributes, that's the logic behind usually. Yeah.
gotcha. And maybe like this is something really powerful feature. We are putting it as like right now as part of the selector.
Mhm.
But if we have a separate component also altogether, where we just put a JavaScript there to find an element directly from the website rather than doing it from like this, like firstly selecting the element and doing it. Maybe like as soon as the web page load, we run a script to get all the elements. Maybe that might be a powerful thing.
You were actually kind of taking away the fuss. The next new component that we had is called execute JavaScript, which
Yep.
executes any arbitrary code you want on a web page. You can use that to return objects, find things, change things, whatever you want to do on that website. Very powerful and very easy to use, actually. If I go back to my studio, this one is hidden here on the page itself. So if the Google page I had, you see
Mhm.
there's a whole bunch of things like close, get URL and stuff. And there's one called execute JavaScript. Let me scroll a bit way down. So I can execute JavaScript, which would now execute that JavaScript on the Google web page. So how do I know what type of JavaScript? We just again click that gear icon, get that box, and we can actually say, hey, I have an input parameter. Let's call it message, for example. And for the sake of the time and my JavaScript is just do console.log with that message. So we have attributes mapping in. You can also have return values and things like that. Let's just say, okay. As a message, say we put in a static value. Hello, Pranav. Okay, that. Before we execute, just I'm making sure we actually see the console, right? Because it's not there. So let's say more tools. Developer tools. This opens all the console and help and stuff. We have here the console. There we go. And if I now execute this component, run from here, jumping over, takes a moment to connect, and we should see here a hello Pranav. If I didn't make any mistake, did I? It's still running. Ooh, okay. It takes longer than expected.
Yeah, maybe it's trying to find the Chrome
Yeah,
object or something on the screen.
I
Maybe you
think
can
so.
just
Right, well, that
close
was
it.
right. Okay, it failed. The pipe endpoint couldn't be found in the machine. Okay, interesting. Let's close down Chrome and restart it.
Yep.
Maybe Chrome had an issue. Go back to Google. Quickly double check if we see the page here. Refresh. It's green, should be good. Okay. And then we need the developer console, otherwise we don't see it. More tools, developer tools. Okay. And now let's run it one more time. There we go. that was fast. And we see, hello, Pranav. Here we go. So we can run any arbitrary code, replace elements on the page, DOM manipulation, anything you want to do, you can actually do with that JavaScript. Anything that the browser lets you do, I would want to say, right? Including mapping input and output variables. Again, really powerful, something we did have for the very old Internet Explorer, but not for modern browsers. Finally, we have that as well.
Definitely, it's a very powerful feature like for RP developers. It will open a lot of different possibilities when they are building their automation, when they have this particular component.
Absolutely. Awesome. I think with that, yes, with that one, we have kind of covered the major changes in RPA Desktop Design Studio. Looking at time, you're halfway through. Awesome. So RPA Hub, a couple of updates and changes we made in RPA Hub. And for these ones, I don't have too much of a demo, maybe not that much developer focus, but still I wanted to show a few things. Import package versions. So as a developer, when you develop your automation, you know that quite some objects in ServiceNow are captured in update sets or in source code, repos, app repo, however you deploy your code base from a dev to a test to production system. With the Utah release, we have managed to make RPA aware of that and have like bot processes, packages, versions, and all these kind of things being captured as such changes and be deployable through the stack, which is great. What was missing, though, is on the packages, the file itself isn't there. So if you look on RPA Hub, wrong one, this one. If you look in RPA Hub, this entry, like the creator toolbox, that would be generated, would be transported. The entry of a version 1001 would have been generated, great. But the attachment that is here on the right-hand side, which is actually the automation file for Desktop Studio, that was missing. That did not come over as part of the deployment. Now with Vancouver, we added a new feature, and I got here one package in that state to at least show you where it is. So that's kind of how it looks like after deployment. You get your package version, and if you look at the package version, there is no attachment. You'll get an error message now saying, hey, hash code validation failed. We seem to miss the package. Yes, you are missing the package. That's how we deploy. But to get that attachment over, we now have a simple button, import attachment, which would reach out to the development environment, fetch that file, upload it here, and everything is fine again. Obviously, in my demo environment here, it doesn't work because it's not fully configured. It's just one instance. You need to define some connectivity, where to find that files, what's the source information, basically. But we have a convenient function. Just click that button, import attachment, and we'll pull it over. Makes the life of the release manager much, much easier than before.
Yep, and then like as these desktop design files a bit like it's on a larger side. They're like 10 MB, 20 MB or something like that. So I know we can't move it using the update sets as of now. So like if we are migrating from dev to test or to production, so what's the format? Like, do we need to download these files first into our machine and then upload it to the next environment, or how it works?
Not anymore. Before with Utah or San Diego, yes, you had to do that. You had to manually download a file and upload the file into target environment. It was a manual step that might have been missed, or you uploaded it to the wrong package or whatever, right? So that might have happened. It potentially error prone. But now with Vancouver, you have that import attachment that would, from the test or production system, reach out to the dev environment, get the file and upload it for you. So there's no manual upload, download required anymore.
Yeah, I think, yeah, got it. I think I missed that during the Utah release. So it came in the Utah release, right?
That button is with Vancouver. With Utah, we started having that the records themselves were transported. With San Diego, we didn't even have that yet. You had to recreate everything manually. So with Utah, we created the records for you, but we didn't do the attachments. Now we also have the attachment, at least in an import feature, import function.
That's perfect. Yeah. I think that will make developers' life and release managers' life easier with this
There's
import
a
thing.
specific role you can actually assign. So if you don't want to have your sysadmins do that, there's a specific RPA release manager role. So you can give that to your developers if you want to, so they can do this button themselves without the risk that they do more than they should be. Right? It's tied to a separate role, so we can delegate that capability.
Gotcha. Thanks, Daniel, on that. Yeah.
Awesome. Moving forward, updating work item. when you're working with queues and flows and stuff to trigger your RPA, which typically you do, right? You get a request like a password reset or whatever kind of information you get from a service catalog, and you put that into RPA, you create a work item, and at a certain stage, you want to maybe update that work item with additional information. There was the content, the action itself did not change, but it does change how it actually reacts to status information, right? So in the past, you could have actually changed that status for a bot that was currently running. So even if that item, that work item, was currently in progress on a robot machine, you could change that status and say, I'm canceling it. The robot wouldn't know. The robot would still continue its work. So you might think it's canceled, but it's actually not. It's still executing, which could lead to some confusion. So now we have changed that. This update work item knows about status information and will prevent such things, saying, hey, I can't change the status right now. It's currently in progress. Let it finish before we do the next step, right? So there's some error checking now added into update work item, which was not there before. If you use that, just have a look at the release notes and make sure it kind of fits your environment. It is basically error checking that we added in here. And some smaller things that we, well, they're actually not that small, but things hard to demo here in the Creator Toolbox that we changed and added and improved. So for once, we removed the trigger mode. You might remember on a bot process, you could define if that process is being triggered by an API, like Flow Definer, or if it's based on a schedule running every day at 9 a.m., things like that. And we had separations, like if you have a robot machine that is defined as a scheduled robot, it would not execute any API calls. If you have an RPA and bot defined for API, it would not run any schedule. So we clearly separated the two. This forced you as a customer to have more machines, right? And these machines might be actually sitting idle. If the schedule is not active, that robot could have done API requests, right? Why not? It's there, it's sitting, it's idling. So we saw that, we removed the trigger mode as a field and all from all the filter conditions. Now you can mix and match that the way you like it. You might run into the situation that your robot is executing a schedule while you API trigger. That's maybe something you need to take care now, right? But at least you have the opportunity which you didn't have before. And it will allow you to use your robot machines more, how do you say that? More efficiently. That's the word I was looking for. So I think that's a good thing. And in the same veins, if you look at the middle column, robot pooling, if you have multiple processes, at this point, up to Utah, each of these processes would probably have their own set of robots. You can have more robots on one process if they need to, right? If it's a high load process that you run, you could have 3, 4, 5, whatever number of robots in one process. But what happens if that process suddenly has more load than it can cope with? It would just sit in there and slowly progress job after job after job. If at the same moment in time you have another set of robots idling because there's no workload, it's kind of pity that we don't use them, right? Because they're sitting there and could do work. With robot pools, we can do that now. We can define a pool of robots independently of the process that they're executing. And the ServiceNow platform will now intelligently find out, oh, this process is overloaded, the other one is not. Let's reallocate some robots to the other one. And we'll shift and start to move the robots between the different processes as they are required. So it makes it much easier or much better for you to, again, utilize your machines for the better, right? So that you get the most out of your robots. A really helpful thing for large-scale deployments. And I think the last one I wanted to talk about is scheduled maintenance. One thing that has been asked a few times in the past. We have all the information in ServiceNow about your robots, which system they connect to, on which machines they run on, but we still kind of, let's say, quote unquote, fail in pre-alerting that there's a change happening, right? If you run like a Windows upgrade on your robot machines, we knew it, but we didn't tell you. And I think that's bad. Now we do. On the robot calendar, we show you the change requests that are linked to any of the CIs that are touched by a robot. If you're talking to an ERP system with your robot and that ERP system is going down for change, for maintenance, we'll mark that in the calendar and tell you, hey, at that time, it's not a wise idea to run your robot. So we see that in the calendars. You see even here a popover with accepts and rejects. If you accept that, we will pause the robot during that time. We will not execute any jobs to wait. So we kind of block out that time windows. I think that's a great feature that it comes in because we have that power in the platform. We know the information, so we definitely should also make use of that. I think that is it, what I have as the major pillars, major blocks for RPA in Vancouver. There's probably some hidden smaller gems that I missed. But yeah, I'll have to focus somewhere and get started. Any questions?
Yeah. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but thank you so much, Daniel, for showing us all these new features in RPA. Personally, I love the JavaScript execute as well as the flow trigger of the flow. These are like game changer for developers. So again, big thanks to you for coming up and showing all these features. And I'd like to also give a shout out to Lauren, who is behind the stage and helping out with the production of this video. So thank you very much, Lauren, for staying up this late and helping me out. So yeah, Daniel, like anything before we close the show, anything you would like to plug in?
No, I think from my side that's I'm interested in your feedback. Please use the comments or reach out to us by any other means that you have posted in the community. And let us know what you think about the Vancouver stuff. What is great? What did you miss? Which features you want to have? Please reach out.
Yep, definitely. And also, like last thing I'll plug into, we have a content calendar at devling.sn/Vancouver, and you can see on the screen, this is the content calendar that Lauren has created. So go ahead and check out this calendar. And yeah, that's all from the show. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you for in the next episode. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.